I was folding clothes into the suitcase when something hard pressed into my palm, and my breath stopped before my mind could catch up. I already knew what it was. The weight, the shape, the cold familiarity made my stomach drop. I stared at the ring resting in my hand and felt disbelief harden into something sharper. I had looked everywhere for it months ago. Months ago. And now it was here, like a ghost refusing to leave. My chest tightened as memories flooded in, uninvited and relentless. I remembered the night he slid it onto my finger, how my hands had shaken, how sure I had been. That certainty felt humiliating now. I wondered how long it had been sitting in that drawer, waiting for me to find it when I was finally ready to leave. The realization felt deliberate, even if it wasn't. I thought about all the things he forgot lately, and how none of them were small. I felt anger flicker, then fade into something heavier. The ring wasn't just metal. It was proof of promises spoken and quietly abandoned. I replayed every moment I ignored, every doubt I smoothed over because I loved him more than I trusted myself. I remembered how he stopped looking at me the same way, how his presence became distant while his body stayed close. Packing should have felt like progress, but instead it felt like erasing myself from a life I built carefully. I thought about my parents' smiles, about my sister's laughter filling the house, about how safe everything once felt. I wondered when safety turned into suspicion. My throat burned as I closed the suitcase, realizing I wasn't just leaving a home, but a version of myself that believed love was enough. The ring stayed in my palm until my fingers curled around it, not in hope, but in resolve. I didn't know what he was hiding yet, but I felt it looming, heavy and unavoidable. Whatever came next would change everything, and I sensed it before the words ever arrived. I sat across from him and felt the shift immediately, the moment where truth stopped hovering and finally landed. He didn't hesitate, and that hurt almost as much as the words themselves. Hearing that he loved my sister felt unreal, like my brain refused to process the sound properly. I waited for clarification, for context, for anything that would make it less final. Nothing came. My body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened, my ears rang, and the room felt smaller, like the walls leaned in to listen. I searched his face for regret and found something closer to relief. That realization hollowed me out. I wondered how long he had been carrying this while I carried us. When he said it just happened, something inside me snapped into focus. Accidents didn't last months. Accidents didn't require lies, secrecy, and careful avoidance. I felt humiliation wash over me as memories rearranged themselves into something ugly and undeniable. Every late night, every deflection, every moment I questioned myself instead of him rose up at once. When my sister entered the room, the betrayal doubled. Seeing her unable to meet my eyes hurt more than anger ever could. I watched guilt and fear flicker across her face, and I understood then that silence had been a choice for both of them. The understanding cut deep. I felt strangely calm as I listened, absorbing the damage without reacting the way I was expected to. I realized I didn't want apologies or explanations. I wanted truth, even if it broke me. Learning how long it lasted confirmed what I already felt in my bones. I had been excluded from my own life. Walking away felt quieter than rage, but heavier. I didn't cry or scream because restraint felt like the only thing left that belonged to me. As I left, I understood that silence would echo longer than anger ever could, and I let it follow me without looking back. The days after felt unreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. I watched my parents choose calm over confrontation, peace over accountability. Their requests for understanding felt like erasure, like my pain was inconvenient. I nodded when I should have screamed, swallowing disappointment that tasted worse than betrayal. When my sister moved into my old room, something inside me broke quietly. Seeing her settle into my space confirmed how easily I had been replaced. Watching him move on publicly made the humiliation sharp and constant. I felt invisible at family dinners, surrounded by forced smiles and careful politeness that bruised more than open hostility. I started questioning myself in the quiet moments. I wondered if I had missed something obvious, if loving deeply had been a flaw instead of a strength. Guilt tangled with anger until I barely recognized my own thoughts. I blamed myself for trusting too much, for staying too long, for believing family meant safety. Maya became my anchor without trying to fix me. She listened without minimizing, validated every ugly feeling I tried to suppress. For the first time, I felt seen without being judged. Her presence reminded me I wasn't unreasonable for hurting, and that alone helped me breathe again. As the weight became unbearable, the idea of leaving stopped feeling like escape and started feeling like survival. I realized staying would destroy me slowly. and leaving was the only way to preserve what little strength I had left. Choosing myself felt terrifying but necessary. Moving to a new city felt like stepping into a life already in progress, one where I didn't belong yet. The streets were unfamiliar, the silence heavier at night, and every routine felt fragile, like it could collapse if I paused too long. I was exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix. Some nights I replayed memories until morning, wishing I could delete them as easily as I deleted messages. The job became my lifeline. Showing up every day forced structure into the chaos. My manager was strict, measured, and distant, but fair enough to make me feel grounded. I didn't need warmth from him. I needed stability. I needed proof that I could still function without the life I lost. I kept my head down, learned quickly, and focused on surviving. Bills replaced heartbreak as my daily concern, and oddly, that helped. There was relief in small victories, like paying rent on time or cooking dinner without crying. Endurance became my quiet achievement. One coworker noticed more than others. He didn't pry or offer advice. His presence felt calm, observant, and respectful of my silence. That mattered more than I expected. I wasn't ready to heal, and I didn't pretend to be. I just learned how to breathe again in manageable pieces. At night, I sorted through old photos and erased them without ceremony. Each deletion felt like loosening a knot. One letter remained untouched, words I never sent because they belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. I kept it, not out of hope, but as proof of how far I still had to go. Time passed quietly without announcements or breakthroughs. I didn't notice myself changing until one day the pain felt distant instead of sharp. The blame I once carried began to loosen its grip, replaced by clarity that arrived slowly and stayed. I stopped asking what I did wrong and started asking what I deserved. Boundaries formed naturally, without guilt. I learned when to say no and when silence was enough. Strength didn't arrive loudly. It settled in through repetition, through choosing myself in small, unremarkable ways. When my best friend visited, she noticed the difference immediately. She didn't comment on my appearance or my job. She noticed my steadiness. That mattered. Hearing her acknowledge my growth confirmed what I hadn't fully admitted yet. I was no longer surviving. I was rebuilding. The coworker remained present, supportive, without pressure. There was no romance, no expectation, just consistency. That steadiness became comforting, a reminder that connection didn't have to hurt to be real. One afternoon, I overheard office gossip about betrayal and loyalty, and the words hit harder than expected. Memories surfaced fast. But instead of breaking, I stayed rooted. I realized the past no longer controlled my reactions. That felt powerful in a quiet, undeniable way. That evening, a call from home shattered the calm. News of pregnancy, financial strain, and regret spilled through the line. I listened without absorbing it. For the first time, their consequences felt separate from my identity. I ended the call knowing the scar they left had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. Returning home felt surreal, like stepping into a memory altered by time. The house looked the same, but the energy had shifted. I noticed it immediately. I noticed everything. Their tension, their fatigue, the way conversations stalled when I entered the room. He looked worn down, less certain, like regret had finally caught up with him. My sister looked smaller somehow, weighed down by choices she could no longer defend. Watching them together didn't hurt the way I expected. It felt distant, observational. My parents hovered awkwardly, unsure how to engage with me now that I wasn't fragile. Their uncertainty confirmed the shift I felt inside myself. I was no longer the weakest presence in the room. I listened as pieces of their reality surfaced through casual conversation. Quitting jobs, financial stress, plans that collapsed under pressure. No one said it directly, but the disappointment was obvious. I didn't interrupt or comment. I didn't need to. I realized karma didn't require my involvement. It unfolded naturally, fueled by choices made long before I left. Watching it happen without satisfaction or sorrow surprised me. I felt neutral, grounded, and intact. His glances lingered longer than necessary, filled with something that resembled loss. I recognized it instantly and felt nothing in return. When he tried to pull me aside, the weight of the moment settled heavily. I didn't know what he wanted to say, but I knew I was no longer afraid to hear it. The apology came without warning, heavy with regret but light on meaning. I listened without interruption, absorbing the weight of words that arrived far too late. Anger stirred briefly, followed by sadness, then relief, and finally a quiet disgust I didn't expect. I realized how little his remorse mattered now. I watched him struggle to explain himself, searching for language that could undo what had already been done. The desperation in his expression felt foreign, like it belonged to a stranger. I remembered the version of myself who would have begged him to stay, who believed love could survive disrespect. That version no longer existed. Forgiveness came easily, not because he earned it, but because I needed it. Carrying resentment felt pointless. Letting go felt cleaner. I understood then that forgiveness was not reconciliation, it certainly wasn't permission, it was closure. The moment held power not because of his apology, but because I didn't need it. I no longer measured my worth through his regret. I had outgrown the pain that once defined me. As I walked away, I felt the shift completely. Control no longer belonged to the one who caused the damage. It belonged to the one who survived it. Distance changed everything. From afar, the updates reached me slowly, filtered through concerned voices and unintentional gossip. Their arguments grew louder, their problems heavier, and the trust between them thinner. I listened without reacting, surprised by my own calm. I didn't celebrate their struggles. I didn't feel responsible either. The emotional weight that once tied me to their choices had dissolved. I had learned that caring didn't mean sacrificing myself, and compassion didn't require rescue. Back in my city, life continued to grow quietly. The connection I shared with my coworker deepened through shared understanding rather than attraction. When he opened up about his own betrayal, the vulnerability felt safe. We didn't rush intimacy, we respected it. That emotional maturity felt like progress. I understood now that healing didn't require grand moments or dramatic closure. It required consistency and honesty. When he appeared unexpectedly at my apartment, the past collided briefly with the present. I didn't panic or freeze. I stood firm, knowing whatever followed would not undo the peace I had built. He arrived desperate, unraveling under the weight of his choices. The regret was raw and unfiltered, but it didn't move me the way it once would have. I listened with clarity instead of emotion, recognizing the difference immediately. He spoke about loss, about how leaving me destroyed his life. I understood then that his pain wasn't love. It was consequence. I explained what survival had taught me, how losing him forced growth I never asked for but desperately needed. I didn't feel powerful in that moment. I felt free. I no longer needed answers or validation. His regret belonged to him, not to me. When he finally left, the space he vacated felt lighter, not emptier. I cried afterward, not for him, but for the woman I used to be. I mourned her innocence, her fear of being alone, and the love she gave too freely. That grief felt necessary. It marked the end of something painful and the beginning of something honest. Peace entered my life quietly, without permission or celebration. I didn't announce it or defend it. I simply allowed it to stay. For the first time, choosing myself didn't feel selfish. It felt necessary. The connection growing in my life moved slowly and respectfully, built on patience instead of urgency. I learned that safety could exist without intensity, and care didn't need to hurt to feel real. That understanding changed how I viewed love entirely. I reconnected with my parents on my terms. Forgiveness existed, but boundaries stayed firm. Distance had taught me clarity, and clarity protected my peace. My sister reached out, burdened by guilt and fear. I listened without absorbing her pain. I didn't rescue her. I didn't punish her either. I finally understood that empathy didn't require self-sacrifice. Healing surprised me by how quiet it felt. I realized happiness didn't need approval and self-respect didn't require explanation. I chose myself without guilt, and that choice felt permanent. Looking back felt different now. The betrayal, the loneliness, and the growth no longer blurred together. Each moment stood clearly on its own, forming a story I finally understood. I acknowledged my flaws without shame. I ignored red flags because I feared being alone. I confused comfort with commitment and loyalty with love. Accepting that truth didn't weaken me, it strengthened me. Pain forced growth I would have avoided if given the choice. What remained felt honest and grounded. When I was asked what I wanted next, not in love but in life, the answer came easily. I wanted peace, purpose, and trust. I wanted stability built on self-worth instead of fear. For the first time, my future didn't revolve around someone else's choices. It belonged entirely to me. That realization felt like reclaiming a life that almost slipped away. The truth settled gently instead of sharply. Losing him was never punishment. It was protection. I wasn't replaced. I didn't win through revenge or validation. I won by becoming someone who no longer needed either. The pain that once consumed me now felt distant, like a lesson remembered without resentment. Growth replaced bitterness. One final symbolic act brought quiet closure. I let go of the letter I once kept. The words written by a version of me who believed love meant self-erasure. Releasing it felt like honoring her while choosing better for myself. I stepped forward without bitterness or fear. Not broken. Not hardened. Whole.